Earl Nightingale, who was just 12 years old at the time, started his quest to discover the elusive key to success. He was motivated by his curiosity, as well as a strong desire to triumph over the difficulties that the Great Depression presented. Through years of unrelenting research, he came to the realization that we become what we think about. This was a defining moment in his life. The Strangest Secret was first recorded as a straightforward message for other people, but it eventually became a gold record, selling over 1 million copies and influencing the self-help business. His musings culminated in the year 1956 with the publication of an essay with the same name. The voyage of discovery that Nightingale undertook tells us that success is not a matter of chance, but rather a deliberate process that involves concentrated thinking, intentional action, and ongoing self-improvement. Over the course of this video, we will examine The Strangest Secret, investigate the deep truths it teaches, and find out how it may completely change your life. Now is the time to get started if you are prepared to realize your full potential and build a future filled with accomplishments and satisfaction.
I began looking for the secret of success when I was 12 years old. I found it at age 29. That was in 1950. In the spring of 1956, I was asked to put the essence of what I had learned during those many years of the most assiduous reading and research into a rather short essay. Because my working career involved both writing and broadcasting, I would then record the essay for the possible benefit of others. I began thinking about it, turning the ideas over and over in my mind. Finally, I asked myself, what would you tell your children if you found you had only a short time to live? What advice could you pass on to them that would assist them in living highly productive, very successful lives? I awakened at 4 the next morning with the answer to that question clearly in mind. I got up, put on a pot of coffee, and went into my study to put my thoughts on paper. By 10 that morning, I had completed the essay. I showered and dressed, and by noon was recording my essay at CBS Recordings in Chicago. It was finished before lunch. I called what I had written and recorded The Strangest Secret. First on tape, then on a 10-inch record, The Strangest Secret became the child that was to grow into the audio recording and publishing industry. Without any effort on my part whatever, no advertising of any kind, The Strangest Secret became a national bestseller. Before very long, my good friend Dick Hutter, then head of Columbia Records in Chicago, told us we had earned a gold record for sales exceeding 1 million copies, and today, as I write this introduction in the early fall of 1986, The Strangest Secret still sells, and the many recorded programs for which it paved the way are now selling to hundreds of thousands of people all over the free world in the form of tape cassettes. I found the secret for which I had searched so long and diligently in a book. Books had become and remain to this day one of my overriding loves. My home is filled with them. They form double rows on the shelves of my study because we don't have enough bookshelves to properly display them. And while nothing can take the place of a tape cassette for a person commuting to and from work in an automobile, books will no doubt remain, for centuries perhaps, the world's great source of knowledge and enjoyment. And now it's time to look back over the intervening years. It's time to revisit The Strangest Secret and examine or re-examine our journey into meaning. And now I must give very special thanks to Diana, my wife, without whose love and laughter and sound thinking and perseverance this book would not have been written at all. She filled my life with love, laughter, and sunshine at a very critical time, and she continues to do so to my everlasting joy. And now, let me thank you, without whom nothing happens, nothing at all. As my old friend Red Motley always said, nothing happens until somebody sells something. In order to fully enjoy prosperity and its accompanying sense of achievement, one needs to have known poverty and an environment in which daily survival is the purpose of life. As a youngster, I didn't know anything about a sense of achievement, but I was all too aware of being very poor. It didn't seem to bother the other kids, but it bothered me. What made it all the more exasperating to me as a boy of 12 was to be poor in Southern California, where there seemed to be so many who were rich. In fact, to me, anyone who had an automobile, an electric refrigerator, and wall-to-wall carpeting was rich, and the children of such people seemed to me to be fortunate indeed. I decided to find out why some people were rich, while so very many of us were poor. The year was 1933, the bottom of the Great Depression. Millions were unemployed. My two brothers and I were fortunate. Although our father had disappeared in search of greener pastures, our mother never missed a day at her WPA sewing factory job. Her earnings, I recall, were $55 a month, which produced survival. We lived for a while in Tent City, behind the old Mariner Apartments on the waterfront in Long Beach, California. What makes the difference, I ask myself? Why are some people well off financially and others poor? Why are some so well paid, while others are so poorly paid? What's the difference? What's going on here? I tried asking the adults who live in our neighborhood and soon discovered they didn't know any more than I did. In fact, I made what was to me an astonishing discovery. The adults in our neighborhood didn't know anything at all. They were pitifully uneducated, rudimentary, driven by instinct, other-directed. My mother had many endearing qualities. One was her unfailing good cheer. Another was her love of books. She haunted the public library, and my fondest memory of her seeing her eating her oatmeal and milk early in the morning before dawn, under that dangling, naked, underpowered light bulb with a book propped up in front of her. She loved travel books especially. Never able to travel herself, she explored the earth from pole to pole with her books on travel and adventure. I'm sure it helped save her sanity during those hard years. She was an attractive woman, still young, but completely dedicated to the raising of her boys. Her books and our battered radio were her only entertainment. She read the books on the long Pacific Electric train rides to and from work in Los Angeles, and after we boys had gone to bed at night. On weekends, after cleaning and doing the laundry, her books again filled her world with exciting travel and high adventure. Later in life, I realized that she never had to stand in a sweltering customs shed, or see her luggage disappear into 3 Italian taxis, or struggle with a foreign language or currency. Yet she traveled from one end of the earth to the other, and was intimate with the most remote places on the planet. That she was able to do so without ever leaving Los Angeles County was a tribute to the excellent public library system. It didn't cost her a dime. And so it was to the Long Beach Public Library that I went, seeking the elusive secret of success. I didn't know where to look amongst those thousands of titles, but I felt sure it was there somewhere. It seemed to me that if anyone had ever figured it out, he surely would have written a book about it. And as I began my search, I soon found myself sidetracked into the world of the most exciting fiction, the Hardy Boys, the great mind-expanding stories of Edgar Rice Burroughs, and the westerns of Zane Grey. Then came the fascinating stories of the Plains Indians by Stanley Vestal, and before I knew it, I was as addicted to books as my mother. I learned about the importance of honesty and personal integrity and courage, and of believing in what is right and being willing to fight for it. I know that it was my early love affair with books that resulted in my getting a better-than-average education. Later, as World War II loomed on the horizon, I left school and enlisted in the Marine Corps. But I continued my studies. I read everything I could lay my hands on. I made 2 decisions that were to guide the remainder of my life. The first was to discover the secret of success. The second was to become a writer. I loved books and wanted to write them myself. Toward the end of the war, I found myself back in the States and working as an instructor at Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. It was driving between the base and nearby Jacksonville that I noticed a radio station under construction and decided to apply for an announcing job, working nights and weekends. I was auditioned and hired. Sitting before the microphone at that small radio station, WJNC, Jacksonville, North Carolina, was the beginning of my radio career. The owner-manager, Lester Gould, and I became good friends. I took to broadcasting like nothing I'd ever done before in my life. I was in my element, and now, more than 40 years later, I'm still at it. My desire to write did not lessen, and gradually I began planning for the day when I would write my own radio programs. My reading and search for the secret of success continued without let-up. I studied the world's great religions. I found myself especially fascinated with philosophy and psychology. But it wasn't until I was 29 and working for CBS in Chicago that one weekend the enlightenment finally came. While reading, it suddenly dawned upon me that I'd been reading the same truth over and over again for many years. I'd read it in the New Testament, in the sayings of Buddha, in the writings of Lao Tzu, in the words of Emerson. And all of a sudden, there they were, the words in the proper order that I'd been looking for 15 years, the astonishing truth that we become what we think about. It was as though I was suddenly immersed in a bright light. Of course, I remember sitting bolt upright at the simplicity of it all. That was what Ortega was talking about when he reminded us that we're the only creatures on Earth born into a natural state of disorientation with our world. It had to be because we're the only creatures with the godlike power to create our own worlds. And we do. We do create our own worlds all the years of our lives. We become what we think about most of the time, and if we don't think, which seemed to have been the principal problem of the people back in my old Long Beach, California neighborhood, we don't become anything at all. There it was, just 6 words. There are more than 600,000 words in the English language, but those were the 6 I'd searched for in that particular order since age 12. 15 years it had taken to see the obvious. How could we become anything else? Our minds are the steering mechanisms of our lives, and each of us thinks differently, who does much thinking at all. There at last was the secret of success or of failure, or of something in between. Each of us is sentenced to become what he or she thinks about. Our big brains are what make us human. How we use them decides our destiny. Our minds are the gyro compasses of our lives, and once set, that's where we're going until they're reset. I was amazed that I had not seen the answer before, but delighted nonetheless that I was at last in possession of the key. I'd made up my mind to find the secret of success and become a successful writer. I'd found the secret, although the fact that it was a secret to so many was strange indeed. Now, to make my living by writing my own radio programs demanded only that I resign a very good job with CBS and strike out on my own. I did both in March of 1950, and I've been on an unbroken upward curve ever since. Those 6 simple words, in that order, revolutionized my life. And I had found them clearly spelled out, just as I had so desperately hoped as a child of 12, not in some hoary ancient tome, but in a book titled Think and Grow Rich, by a man named Napoleon Hill. Later, through my friendship with W. Clement Stone, the Chicago insurance tycoon, I met and got to know Napoleon Hill. I'll never forget our meeting. It took place at the old Edgewater Beach Hotel on Chicago's North Shore. I remember seeing this very thin, smiling old gentleman coming down a curving marble staircase. As he approached me, he held out his hand and said simply, "I'm Napoleon." I recall fighting back the urge to respond with something like, "How do you do? I'm Alexander the Great," but this was the man who had managed to extract from the major philosophies and religions of the world, and the life stories of dozens of America's most successful people, the 6 words that represented, more than any other factor, why people live the lives they do. He had articulated the secret I had been searching for so long. Growth and increase, and life abundant, are the way of nature. It should be inherent in each of us to desire more life and more of what life has to offer. That's not wrong. It's perfectly natural and the way it should be. The winners in the world are those men and women who plan it that way. They're people with a vision of the future that is sufficiently important to them that they're willing to do what is necessary to arrive in the midst of their vision. So let's ask that question. What is your vision of your future? We become what we think about. If you know what you want to become, you'll become it. Visualization is a force of incalculable power. As the Calcutta poet Rabindranath Tagore reminds us, faith is the bird that feels the light and sings when the dawn is still dark. We grow into our expectations. It's too bad that so few manage to muster expectations more in keeping with their true potential. A business executive leaves his home to go to the office. It's early summer and a beautiful morning. He drives his late-model, expensive car, shining from frequent washings, out of the garage, sweeps down the drive to the shaded street, and turns toward town. On both sides of the street, fine homes can be seen, their lawns and landscaping well cared for, their paint bright, windows sparkling clean in the early morning light. Our business executive drinks in the sight. Beautiful, he says to himself. What a lovely morning. All is well. His world is in order. His fine car makes hardly a sound as it moves along the clean, orderly street. The neighborhood reflects this executive and the people in his socio-economic group who own the houses up and down the street. It's as natural for our business executive and his wife to choose the home in which they live and pay the price for it as it is for any family anywhere. They think and live in those terms. The neighborhood reflects them, their education and aspirations, their levels of accomplishment, and costs them no more from a percentage of income standpoint than do the homes and neighborhoods of anyone else in the country. And, this is important, once acquired, that home and neighborhood and society represent constant reinforcement of themselves and their place in the scheme of things. Now, they may move further upwards or sideways, but the chances of their moving backwards, or let's say downwards, are so small as to be negligible. Their environment is a mirror of their current place on the human achievement ladder. You are, at this moment, the sum total of your thoughts to this point in your life, and so am I, and so is that man across the street, and there, that woman going into the supermarket. Watch them, study them, look at their faces. They're the most interesting creatures on the planet, and the most charged with possibilities. But do they know that? Do they know that their daily lives are mirrors of their thinking? Do they know about the subject we're discussing here? Alas, no. Most of them do not. Most of them are simply keeping pace with the slice of their socio-economic pyramid they have unconsciously chosen as their lot in life. They do not know that by thinking in new directions, which incidentally has been called the definition of genius, they can bring new directions into their lives. Most of them are simply marking time as though they have a non-cancelable contract with life. How can we rise above our more egregious mistakes if we just mark time? Let's do it better than it's been done before. Let's find our partner in the freest, richest land on earth and do something wonderful with this holiday on earth we've been mysteriously granted. Here's where our individual and original DNA helixes come into the picture. Each of us is an original whether we like it or not. Each of us has a genetic profile unlike any other person that ever has or ever will appear on this planet. That's true because no one else in the universe has our particular set of ancestors, nor our exact genetic mix. Each of us might think of himself or herself as a painting. Each of our parents, and each of our parents' thousands of ancestors has placed a small daub of paint on that painting. After you were born, your environment began adding to the painting that is you, and it was different from your brothers and sisters. That composite work determines the way we tend to think. What you can do and what you want are different from what I can do and what I want, and different in some ways from what everyone else can do and want. That's what keeps everybody from wanting and doing the same thing. Our rich genetic inheritance gives each of us a wide range of options, and our free society gives us free choice. The better the environment in which we're raised, or the better our education as young people, and the better the education of our parents, the greater the spectrum of our options to which we will be exposed during our formative years. But in any case, chosen at random, the odds are about 95-5. That ideal background is not ours. Someone once wrote, "If you suffer without succeeding, it's so that someone may succeed after you. If you succeed without suffering, it's because someone suffered for you. But there is no success without suffering. I think the word suffering used in that context is meant to mean striving, making the grade to a new higher plateau. In every family of affluence, someone, somewhere, had to climb from a lower level to a higher level. Even British royalty had a poor striver somewhere in the past if one goes back far enough. Old money simply means that several generations have lived in the lap of luxury because some character back there had a good idea and worked his rear end off and probably had a wonderful time doing it to move the family from the poor neighborhood to the rich neighborhood. The most important information I ever learned in my life is that we become what we think about. What do you think about? What's your goal? Can you write it out in a single sentence? One goal at a time, please. If you have more than one, or if you'd like some intermediate goals which lead toward a large goal, list them separately and number them 1, 2, 3, 4, and so forth. This brings order to your life and purpose to your days. You are today the sum total of your thoughts to this point in your life. Are you pleased with your present place in the world? Yes or no? If your answer is yes, what's your next port of call? If your answer is no, what are you going to do about it? What are you going to start thinking about? Now, we control what we think about, and by so doing, each of us tells, to an altogether unsuspected extent, his and her own fortune. Our world tells us the truth about ourselves. It reveals what we've learned, what we've done, and how much we've served. The old saying, "What you are speaks so loudly I can't hear what you're saying," is therefore apt. Don't tell me what you're going to do. Show me. Go do it. I've always felt glibness a serious danger to accomplishment. Like a steam valve, as we talk at great length about what we're going to do, we seem to lose just that much steam when it actually comes to doing it. Another cliché puts it well: actions speak louder than words. A couple traveling in India noticed a pleasant-appearing young Indian man sitting by a bridge near their hotel. They saw him sitting in that one spot, day after day. Becoming curious, they asked him one day why he just sat there by the bridge all day, every day. He replied, "I happen to believe in reincarnation. I believe that I've lived many times before and that I will have many lives following this one. So this life, I'm sitting out." Well, he had a plan and was engaged in following it. How about you? On occasion I've been questioned by serious people who ask, "You say that we become what we think about, but what about people who choose dreams much too large for their inherent capacities?" Well, discounting serious neurosis or outright psychosis, it's been my experience that far from choosing goals too great for our inherent capacities to reach, we tend to underestimate ourselves and set them much too low, especially in the beginning. There seems to be a natural human tendency to take the accomplishments of others in stride, but doubt the accomplishments we ourselves can reach. We've lived in our own skin so long we tend to take ourselves for granted. We tend to underestimate our potential for growth and achievement. If you have difficulty in deciding that which you would most like to do, here's a little game you can play that might help you decide. Let's pretend that you're financially independent, you have a very good income, and don't have to concern yourself about it. It's Monday morning. You wake up feeling great. You can do anything you want to do. What would you most enjoy doing? And what would you most enjoy doing on Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday and Friday? Write it down. "Oh, that couldn't be," someone will say. "I'd most enjoy sailing a boat and working around boats." If that's what you would most enjoy doing, and you know that from having done it a great deal, then there's your key. There's something in the boat business for you. And there are 50,000 parts to the boat business or any other business. It's a big industry. And if it's your thing, go to it. Whatever your mind most naturally turns to, that's probably the key to an enjoyable and productive future. Examine it. Write it down. Explore it from every possible angle. There's opportunity there, worlds of it. We do not seriously choose goals that are beyond our inherent capacity to achieve. Our very choice is determined by what we are, our genetic set, we might say. But in doing that which we most enjoy, we will very probably make our most significant contribution to society. And it is by the contribution we make to society that our rewards are determined. As you sow, so shall you reap. The more one thinks about that great truth, the more one would like to see it emblazoned on the walls of schoolrooms, boardrooms, the agencies of government, and as a periodic television message along with radio spots and appropriate outdoor advertising. Anyone who's been an adult for any appreciable length of time can assess the extent and quality of his or her sowing by the simple expedient of taking inventory of his or her harvest. Our harvest at any point in our lives is the total input from our world. It is represented by our family, our spiritual life, the friends we've acquired, the attitude of our co-workers toward us, the place in which we live, the things we own, and, of course, our financial return. Our harvest, at any given time, is the total of what we have accumulated and are receiving from the world in which we're participating, and it is, of course, dependent upon the extent and quality of our efforts and service. As we sow, so we reap. Cause and effect. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. You needn't bother to look for exceptions to that rule. There aren't any. The great law does not deviate for anyone. If your grandfather left you $300 million after taxes, you would still be subject to the great law of cause and effect. You would be happy or miserable, or a combination of both, and you would be successful or unsuccessful as a person, dependent solely on the causes you set in motion. As you would sow, so would you reap all the years of your life. If you sow friendship, you will receive friendship in return. If you sow love, you will receive love in return. If you sow that which is good and beneficial to all concerned, your harvest will be good and beneficial to you. But in all cases, it is we who must set the law in motion, or in cases where the law is set in motion by others, it will be our response as a participant that will keep it going or stop it dead in its tracks as far as we are personally concerned. I've long used the metaphor of the wood stove. We must supply the wood and strike the match if we desire heat in return. To sit in front of a cold stove and demand that it supply heat first before we'll take any action is to sit in front of a cold stove forever. A what's-in-it-for-me attitude attempts to preempt heat from our wood stove before bothering to supply the wood and light the fire. People say, "I need a job," or "I need work." Here, once again, we have the cold stove metaphor, the childish acquisitiveness. How different it would be if the same people said, "I know I can be of service to the people of this community. Now, what can I do best that will do the best possible job of serving these people and still be a service that I'll enjoy providing?" Here we have the wood and the striking match, at least in inchoate form. We're on the right track. The distinguished Dr. Albert Einstein was once asked, "Doctor, why are we here?" He turned to his questioner in surprise that he had asked so elementary a question and replied, "We're here to serve other people." Of course, we're here to serve. Everything that we ever receive and from which we will derive special pleasure and joy will come to us as a result of our having served. It's the key to a happy marriage and a happy family. It's the key to a happy organization of any kind.